All right, what's up, guys? Um, Welcome back. Here's another video segment. Um, and today, what I kind of wanted to talk about was the whole concept of periodization. Kind of what is it? Some of my views and some of the things that I've seen through personal experience, um, and just kind of the way I approach it. So, I in the first video, I kind of outlined how I normally program for an athlete during a 12-week cycle. And then in the second video, I provided an example of kind of the training and kind of the reason why I use certain methods and the accumulation, intensification, alternating phase. So now I kind of want to talk about the general idea of periodization. So what is periodization? Periodization, all right, came from, or originally was defined by Tudor Bompa. I would highly recommend reading his book, but the way that it's defined in his book is periodization is a method by which training is divided into smaller, easy to manage segments that are typically referred to as phases of training. So essentially, you're dividing an annual training plan into smaller phases to make it easier to plan and manage training to achieve peak performance at competition. So the whole purpose of periodization is that end goal, that competition. It's essentially a form of planning your training so that you manage fatigue and achieve greater performances in your sport or in training. So you're essentially structuring training phases in specific orders to target certain abilities, which contributes to increasing all the required abilities that the athlete needs for the sport. So kind of looking back at what I was talking about in the previous segment, certain phases had certain qualities that were emphasized, and they all kind of build on one another to achieve a final goal, and that is to increase, say for hockey, is to increase muscle size, muscle strength, and power and speed. So all periodization is pretty much just a planning and structuring of training to achieve an end goal. So some of the terms commonly used in periodization, I myself, I'm still like not super comfortable. You'll rarely see me use these words, but essentially there's a macro cycle, which normally is about a year long. It's normally a year-long cycle. Then we have a mesocycle, which is normally around a month long. So like an accumulation phase would be considered a mesocycle. Then we have the microcycle, which normally are bi-week, but this is the one that has the most variation to it. Some people believe in 7-day microcycles, 10 days, 14 days. It all depends on kind of how you structure your training sessions, and whether you do 2 days on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 1 day off. So this is very variable. And then finally, the simplest form of periodization is the training session itself. Okay. And that is essentially a day. So this is something, I read these books and I read these articles, and it all sounds dandy. You have a very nicely thought out plan, but the reality for most coaches is that they need to go off plan. Okay, I've seen this constantly in my own training, in training my athletes, and in the training of my peers, and seeing kind of how the other guys in my gym work with their athletes and the situations that they're put in. So this is typically what you kind of expect heading into, let's say, an off season for hockey. I know, okay, I got my guys for 12 weeks. This is kind of an expectation of how I plan their training. All right. The first 3 weeks is focused on hypertrophy, rebuilding some muscle. Then we might do 6 weeks of strength and then finish with a power transfer phase. However, it's not necessarily always a reality. Okay. This is something that, it's just an example. I haven't seen this, but I have seen little glimpses. Okay. So let's say if one of my guys, they come and they finish their season, they come to me. We have first 3 weeks, we're able to train some hypertrophy. Well, whoop, then they get drafted. Well, okay, right after that, they have to go to the rookie camp for the respective team. So they're not with me for a week. Okay, and then we come back, and then all right, we got to focus a little bit on strength. We have 3 good weeks, and then another couple of good weeks of training, but they start to go on the ice. When they're going on the ice more often, which means that the recovery is diminished, so they're not able to recover from both the ice and the training stimulus that I'm giving them. So it's ideally you would want to restructure your training slightly to manage fatigue. Then let's say for week 10, exactly, decreased recovery. So now we need to change the plan. Well, let's say a couple weeks before they leave me, their agency has a camp. So they're gone for a whole week. All they're really doing is kind of ice and skill sessions and maybe a little bit of training, but it doesn't really fit with your plan. So it's very, I would say, it's not the ideal situation. Okay. And then the final week, well, they're retired from the camp because of all the high volume of skating and practices that they've done. So we might focus on power, but it's almost like a deload week before they head to their camps. Okay. So the main point about this is don't ever expect to follow the plan that you made from the start. All right. Almost 100% of the time, I find myself going through a phase and then realizing, okay, I might have to switch a little thing that I originally made to achieve the end goals. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick example, and this was an athlete that I had this previous summer. Okay, so he came to me, and we were able to get, I would say, around 3 weeks of good training. He was able to do everything properly, but he had a slight knee injury during this season, and he had a small bone chip in his knee that had to be removed. So about 3 weeks in, he had to get surgery. So that completely scrapped about 6 weeks of training. Not completely, but we were constantly trying to find ways to train. So I was in constant communication with the physiotherapist and saying, okay, what should he do? What can he do? So we were doing a lot of unilateral work because one, he had a large limb imbalance after the surgery. We had to increase his range of motion of his knee because he was he wasn't allowed to bend it. And we had to increase his ability to absorb force on the knee. He didn't feel stable on it. So normally when we're focused on strength and trying to build a lot of power, we were kind of addressing small little nuances such as limb imbalances and ability to absorb force, which is not ideal. However, we were able to say about 6 weeks, kind of get him back to 100% or enough that he could start jumping and doing the regular training sessions with his group. And after that, at the end of the off season, I tested all my guys, and he was the one who had the greatest improvements in his jumping abilities and his peak power. So if you look at the example, he gained about 7 pounds of body weight, but jumped about 3 inches higher and produced about 600 watts more of power. So, as a coach, I think, the moral of the story is that, I'm not against periodization. I'm very much believe in planning, and you should have a plan. But I'm against kind of being extremely rigid to what you originally made and decided for your guys. Okay, so I just want you to understand that periodization is kind of just a roadmap to a final destination, but you need to realize that there are many, many roads lead to Rome. Okay, so if you might be heading in one direction because you think that's the best way, well, something might drive you off course where, okay, you need to be agile on your feet and realize, okay, here's a situation I have. What can I do to kind of get me back on track? And I think this is kind of the part where, some coaches forget that coaching is both an art and not only a science. Okay. So my opinion and kind of the way that I go about it is I develop a plan. All right. I develop a plan at the beginning of the summer. It's and then I start executing the plan. And then once I'm executing the plan, I'm constantly evaluating what I'm doing and how my athletes are progressing and recovering. Okay. So you execute, you evaluate, then you analyze your plan. All right. Is your athlete on track with your plan? Are they off track a bit? What is my athlete missing to get back on track? Are there adjustments needed? Okay. So it's a constant kind of evaluating and analyzing, seeing where your athletes are at and if they're heading towards the end goal. Now, if yes, then make necessary adjustments to the plan and continue the little cycle there of adjust the plan, execute the plan, evaluate, analyze. Okay. And this was another coach that I spoke to with recently. It was Ben Prentice, and he has a similar mentality. And we were discussing about the misconception of simply getting the athlete stronger will make them faster. And he started showing me videos of one of his athletes deadlifting over 500 pounds for reps. Okay. And then the athlete did more weight the next week, but before moving on and keep pushing the weight, Ben shut it down, because even though the plan might have said to continue with the trap bar deadlift for 1 to 2 weeks, well, he's already strong enough, so there's no carryover to a sport. Okay. So he evaluated his athlete, he analyzed what he needed or what he didn't need anymore, and that was strength. And he determined that driving more strength was not needed. So he adjusted the plan and started focusing more on transferring that strength into power. Okay. So one of my favorite quotes by Jim Wendler is know your trapdoors. So when I believe when he was talking about this, he was talking about a different scenario, but I think it still applies to this, where, knowing your trapdoors means knowing if something goes off course of your plan, you're able to kind of redirect it into the right direction. Okay. So another source that I really liked was I read the book Strength Training Manual, the Agile Periodization Approach, and it's written by a guy Mladen Jovanovic, and he has a very, very good website called Complementary Training. And basically in this book, he got me thinking about the concept of periodization and being more agile when it came to planning. So it's very philosophical, but it definitely challenges some common thoughts regarding planning, and it certainly challenged my beliefs going from let's say a more structured, I believe it's what he calls a top-down approach, to a more bottom-up approach, where you're more kind of, as I mentioned before, evaluating the plan, analyzing, and adjusting only if needed. Okay. So if you guys have any more questions, all right, please send me an email. My emails are there. My Instagram is there. Don't hesitate to send me a DM. And I really hope you guys enjoy these, and we'll see you next time. All right, peace out, guys.